Hello everyone, tonight we are stepping quietly into a world that was colder than your ex's heart and less forgiving than your Monday alarm clock. Picture this. The snow crunches underfoot, or your nose is redder than a medieval alehouse drunkard. And the wind, it's not just blowing, it's judging you. It's the dead of winter in a small medieval village. The sun has packed it in early again, retreating behind skeletal trees that offer all the protection of a gossiping neighbor during plague season. You're making your way home after a long day of, well, let's be honest, mostly surviving. Farming is more of a spring sport. Today you were probably chopping wood, patching holes in walls, or cursing at frozen turnips. You shuffle along the path, the snow squeaking under your shoes. If you're lucky, they're leather. If not, they're wooden clogs. Or worse, stitched scraps of cloth that used to be something better. Your feet have gone numb, and you're not sure if it's from cold or from stepping on yet another hidden puddle under the snow crust. Your cloak, if you even own one, has seen better centuries. It's patched thin and smells faintly of smoke, old soup, and desperation. Wind knifes through the fabric like it has a vendetta. There's straw stuffed between your tunic and underlayers. It itches like mad. But that straw might be the only thing between you and becoming a peasant-shaped popsicle. As you pass the church, the bell chimes. Not for a service, just to let everyone know that the village hasn't frozen over. Yet, you can't help but glance up at the sky. It's already indigo with stars pushing through. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks, or maybe a wolf. You don't really want to find out. When you finally push open your crooked wooden door, your body creaks worse than it. The inside of your home is no tropical escape. There's no insulation, no glass in the windows, just cloth nailed to keep the wind out, and some drafty goodwill. Your family is gathered around the fire, or where the fire should be. Someone's coaxing embers with the breath of a saint. You stamp the snow off your boots and offer a grunt that serves as a greeting and weather report all in one. In the corner, your younger sibling is still bundled in a hood and mittens inside the house. Their nose is running like it's late for a market stall. Grandma's muttering about how this winter is just like the Great Freeze of '87. You don't ask which '87. She never specifies. The fire finally catches, throwing shadows against the smoke-darkened beams. You huddle close, not for comfort, but to remind your fingers they exist. Someone passes you a chunk of bread that's mostly crust and a little regret. And you think to yourself, people today get upset when their thermostat breaks for a day. But here now, with the snow still clinging to your shoulders and your knees aching from the cold, you don't complain. Complaining takes energy, and you're saving that to not die tonight. It's in moments like this that historians still debate whether medieval peasants were remarkably resilient or just too exhausted to notice how awful things really were. Odd fact for the night. Some medieval folks believed sleeping with an onion on your chest could help warm your lungs and prevent chills. You're not sure if it works, but hey, your cousin reeks of onion, and he's still alive. So who are you to judge? Outside, the snow starts again. Quiet, slow, and completely inconsiderate. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. And I'd love to know, where are you listening from, and what time is it there right now? Now turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise, and let's get started tonight. You stretch out near the fire, your cloak steaming slightly. It's not much, but it's home. And as you close your eyes, listening to the wind rattle the shutters, you wonder, Will tonight be cold enough to steal your dreams? Wool is wealth, and you dear frost-bitten wanderer of the Dark Ages are not particularly rich. Tonight, after stomping the snow from your shoes and tossing your near-frozen gloves onto a stool that doubles as a goat's resting spot, you peel off layers like a human onion, only to reveal one prized possession, your wool tunic. It's not the soft, ethically sourced kind your descendants will pay extra for at a medieval-themed Etsy store. No, this is scratchy, slightly damp, and has the color of something that used to be alive. Still, it's warm. Kind of Amish. Wool back then was life insurance without the paperwork. It repelled moisture, sort of held in body heat, if you didn't move too much, and doubled as both workwear and sleepwear. The same tunic you wore while digging ditches at sunrise was also the one you curled up in at night while wondering if your roof would survive another gust. Now, if you were really lucky, or let's say your uncle didn't gamble away the family sheep, you might have a second wool layer, maybe even leggings. But layering wasn't a fashion statement. It was the only reason your knees hadn't shattered into icicles. Your little brother shuffles over, dragging a blanket that smells like wet dog and fireplace smoke. He's wearing a hat indoors, and another one over that. You'd laugh if you weren't doing the exact same thing. Here's the thing. Wool back then wasn't just warmth. It was currency. In some places, peasants paid their taxes with wool. Seriously. Imagine showing up at the IRS with a sweater and saying, "We cool." Historians still debate whether medieval people actually liked their wool clothing, or if it was just the least bad option in a world without Uniqlo. In colder regions like northern England or Central Europe, entire villages depended on the annual sheep shearing. Wool was carded, spun, and woven in homes during the bleak post-harvest months. It was both job and necessity. Your mother's hands gnarled from years of spinning move like muscle memory as she twists fibers by firelight, never missing a beat. Even children knew how to patch a hole or refelt a slipper. Clothing wasn't fast fashion. It was slow, painful, and possibly cursed. And once it wore out, you didn't throw it away. You stitched, rewove, or turned it into stuffing, or a rag, or a very itchy toy. Odd fact, in especially harsh winters, people would stuff wool scraps between the rafters or in holes in their walls for extra insulation. Yes, even the walls wore sweaters. Back in your room, which is really just a corner, partitioned off with a curtain. You kneel and tuck your woolen blanket over a pile of straw and woven reeds. There's a lump where your elbow should go, but it's fine. Comfort is a myth told by noble children. You wiggle into your makeshift bed, pulling your one halfway decent wool coverlid up to your chin. The corners are fraying, and you're pretty sure there's a burr trapped near your ankle, but it's still better than nothing. The fire crackles, and the wool near your face smells faintly of lanolin sheep grease. It's a weirdly comforting scent, like how modern people get nostalgic about the smell of old books or gasoline. No judgment. There's an art to arranging your wool layers. Too tight, and you trap in dampness. Too loose, and you invite the cold in like an uninvited dinner guest. You eventually settle into your usual position, curled tight knees to chest cloak, pulled over your nose like a medieval burrito. Somewhere across the room, your cousin coughs in his sleep. Again. You consider asking the priest next market day if coughing during sleep is a sign of possession or just poor lung circulation. Medieval medicine is mostly vibes after all. You close your eyes and try not to imagine what's living in the wool around you. Mites probably. Fleas, definitely. But it's okay. You're warm enough. Kind of. The wind howls outside. You pretend the wool around your shoulders is armor. Not the shining nightly kind, but the peasant kind. Scratched, smelly, frayed, but still holding. Beds are not soft. And yours, well, it's more of a lumpy philosophical idea than an actual sleeping surface. Tonight, like every night, you shuffle over to the place in your home where the floor creaks the least and the straw hasn't fully decomposed. You call it a bed, but that's a generous term. It's a low wooden frame, roughly hammered together decades ago by someone with more ambition than skill. On top of it lies a sack filled with hay moss feathers from whatever unfortunate birds were around, and if you're lucky, a handful of stolen sheep wool clumped in the middle. You drop into it with a thud that knocks some of the warmth from your lungs. The hay pokes through the cloth like it's testing your resolve. A small yelp escapes you when one particularly enthusiastic straw jabs you under the ribs. You shift groan and stuff a rag in the offending corner. This is your mattress. It smells vaguely of damp earth chicken and dust that's probably older than the king. You stare up at the smoke-blackened ceiling beams above and briefly wonder if spiders feel cold. The fire in the central hearth is still sputtering. It gives off a faint orange glow, just enough to cast long shadows across your parents snoring gently on the other side of the room. The flickering light makes the walls dance. Or maybe that's just your exhaustion playing tricks on you. You try to pull your feet in, curling up like a worm, because the further your limbs are from the air, the better chance they have of not becoming peasant popsicles by morning. A lopsided wooden stool sits next to your bed, doubling as a table a seat, and occasionally a step stool for reaching the attic. On it is a clay cup filled with whatever hot liquid passed for tea tonight. Dandelion root and a prayer, probably. You sip it, and it's bitter enough to make you wince. Still, it helps your hand stop shaking. Odd fact. Many peasants shared their beds with pets not out of love, but because a warm dog, or even a chicken, could mean the difference between frostbite and just shivering. Some folks even invited pigs in during the harshest winters. Yes, pigs. Because they're warm, they don't complain, and they have excellent heat retention. Plus, the snoring is strangely comforting. Your bed creaks as you shift again. You consider moving to the hearth, but it's already occupied by your uncle, who sprawled across the floor with a contented sigh and a face full of smoke. That's another thing the fire, without a chimney smoke, just drifts up and finds a crack in the thatch to escape. If it doesn't, well then it fills your lungs. You've built up a tolerance, but every now and then, it gets bad enough to make your eyes sting like you've chopped an entire onion with a broken sword. Historians still debate whether medieval sleeping arrangements caused more health problems than they solved. Respiratory illness was common, and between the smoke, the drafty walls, and the occasional rat nibble, you're sleeping in a hazmat zone wrapped in burlap. Tonight, though, you've added a little extra comfort. Before bed, you heated a flat stone in the fire and wrapped it in cloth. It's tucked near your feet now, offering about 5 glorious minutes of radiant warmth before becoming just another cold rock in your straw mattress. You hear your brother mutter something in his sleep, then let out a snort that rattles the silence. Across the room, someone coughs. Again. You begin to suspect your cousin has more mold than blood in his chest. You pull the itchy wool blanket over your head. It smells like smoke sweat and old sheep. You try to imagine it's a cloud, a very itchy, slightly damp cloud that weighs 40 pounds and might contain a spider or two. Sleep comes slowly in this bed. You drift in and out. First there's warmth, then a cold draft finds your neck. You adjust. Then your leg cramps. You roll over. Then someone in the room lets out a suspiciously loud ahem, the prelude to a midnight bathroom trip. You sigh. If only beds were soft. If only they were quiet. If only they were warm. But then again, if you wanted that, you should have been born a bishop. Still, eventually sleep finds you. Not gracefully. It sneaks up while you're still grumbling, still itchy, still shifting, to avoid that one twig that refuses to flatten out. And when it does, you welcome it, like an old friend you don't entirely trust. The fire flickers. The wind groans through the walls. You nestle deeper into your lumpy fortress of hay and wool. And somehow, despite it all, you sleep. Sleep, then freeze, then wake. That's the rhythm now. That's the beat of winter. You didn't really fall asleep so much as fall sideways into unconsciousness. At some point in the night, your brain gave up trying to make your limbs comfortable and just decided to shut down. But it never stays that way for long. It starts with a shiver, a deep bone-level twitch that yanks you halfway back into the waking world. One toe touches the side of the bed where the blanket slipped off, and it feels like it's brushing the surface of a frozen pond. You groan. You shift. You pull the corner of the wool blanket back into place, but now you're aware. Now you're cold. And now you're awake again. This is the medieval version of REM sleep, rest, escape blankets. Moan repeat. You curl into a tighter ball forehead, touching your knees. Arms crossed under your chin. Your breath fogs up inside your blanket cocoon, and a drop of condensation falls right onto your nose. Charming. The fire has shrunk to embers. You can hear it crackle faintly under the wheezing snores of your family, layered around the hearth like very cold lasagna. Your cousin mumbles something about pigs again. Maybe he's dreaming of bacon. Maybe he's dreaming of warmth. Lucky him. You're not supposed to move too much. Every shift lets the cold in like a particularly nosy neighbor who doesn't knock. So you try to stay still. You try. But then a cramp twists in your calf, and the pain shoots up your leg like a lightning bolt from an annoyed thunder god. You jolt upright with a grunt, which earns you a muffled shh from someone across the room. You stretch your leg. It doesn't help much. But at least now you're upright and staring into the dark. Odd fact. Medieval peasants didn't sleep in one uninterrupted chunk. Most people had what's called segmented sleep. They'd go to bed early, sleep for a few hours, wake up in the middle of the night sometimes for an hour or more, then fall back asleep until dawn. That first stretch of sleep was called first sleep, and the second, well, second sleep. Creative. During that waking period, you might stoke the fire, pray mend clothes, even chat quietly with whoever else was awake. Tonight you opt for staring blankly at the ceiling. The roof beams above you look warped and smoky. One of them creaks ominously in the wind. You imagine it falling and crushing you mid-slumber. Honestly, could be worse. At least it would be warm. You sigh and push your feet closer to your sister's, who's already snuggled up to your side like a half-frozen cat. She kicks you in her sleep, probably by accident, though. With siblings, it's hard to say. You glance toward the small fire pit in the center of the room. It's barely glowing. You debate getting up and tossing on another log. But the thought of peeling yourself from your semi-warm indent is enough to keep you planted. Barely. Historians still debate whether segmented sleep was a natural biological rhythm or simply a cultural adaptation to cold darkness and smoke-filled rooms. Either way, it was normal. Your waking moments in the night weren't failures of sleep. They were part of the deal. Sometimes you use this time to whisper prayers. Tonight you murmur a half-remembered chant to St. Cuthbert, patron of things you're pretty sure include not dying in your sleep. There's a rustle near the fire. Someone else is awake, wrapped in a cloak, shuffling to relieve themselves outside. You hear the door creak, a gust of air whistle in, and then slam shut again. You don't envy them. You really, really don't. You tuck your nose into your collar and breathe through your mouth. It smells like old wool smoke and boiled cabbage. You let your eyes drift closed again, even as the cold clings to your ears like tiny frozen goblins. You promise yourself you'll get up in just a minute to check the fire. Just a minute. But then, second sleep sneaks up on you. It tiptoes through the straw and settles over your shoulders like a quilt made of exhaustion. And you let it in. Shared warmth is survival. And tonight, you're the middle spoon in a heap of half-conscious humans stacked like logs in a firewood pile. Forget personal space. That's a luxury for nobles and future generations with thermostats. In your world, the only thing standing between you and frost-bitten limbs is the blessed furnace of human flesh. Your little brother is curled against your back, snoring gently and emitting waves of heat like a living bed warmer. In front of you, your cousin's feet are tucked behind your knees. Her socks, if you can call them that, are more holes than fabric, but you can still feel the cold dampness of them. You hate it. You're grateful for it. Both things can be true. You've long since stopped being picky about who shares the bed. Grandmother, children, uncles, occasionally even the neighbor if their fire went out. And yes, once or twice the family goat. That was awkward, but warm. The bed creaks as someone shifts, releasing a puff of cold air from under the covers. A unanimous groan echoes from the pile. You all instinctively pull closer, a synchronized shuffle like a herd of sleepy caterpillars. Odd fact, some families slept in rotation, literally taking turns being in the warm center. The youngest or weakest were often given the most insulated spots, while the strongest got the drafty edge. It wasn't affection. It was strategy. You try to keep your elbows to yourself, but that only lasts 5 minutes. The cold creeps in, she finds your spine, and you flinch. Your brother mutters something about apples, or owls. Hard to tell. He burrows deeper into your shoulder. Someone's breath tickles your ear. It smells faintly of onions and sour ale. You sigh. Survival isn't pretty. The warmth at the core of the bundle is intense, almost too much. But even the sweaty discomfort is better than shivering solo on the edge. You've tried that. Once. Never again. You'd rather be trapped between a snorer and a drooler than lie alone. Historians still debate whether people in the Middle Ages preferred these arrangements or simply endured them. Was it familial closeness or cold necessity? Either way, no one complained too loudly. Not if they wanted to wake up with toes intact. You remember once, years ago, when you had a bed to yourself during summer. It felt glorious, sprawling, airy. But now in winter, you'd trade elbow room for body heat every time. There's an art to sleeping in a heap. The eldest usually claims the wall side. It's the least drafty and the most stable. The youngest nestle in the center, squirmy and warm. Everyone else just fills in gaps like puzzle pieces made of wool and fatigue. Sometimes there are nighttime negotiations. Move over. Your foot is in my ribs. Stop breathing on my neck. But mostly, people sleep through it. The exhaustion of daily survival is the best sedative. You think of castles and lords with their big feather beds and fireplaces in their bedrooms. How strange you muse to sleep alone in silence and warmth. Would they even know what to do with that kind of comfort? Probably cry from loneliness. You smirk at the thought. You reach down and tug the shared wool blanket higher. It's thin, patched with at least 4 different shades of fabric and heavy, with years of soot and sleep. But it works. Barely. Somewhere outside, a dog barks. The wind follows with a gust that rattles the shutters. Your pile of family responds like a living organism, shivering, murmuring, and inching closer in unison. And still you sleep. In fits and fragments, but you sleep. Because here, in this imperfect warmth, surrounded by bodies and breath, and the scent of cabbage stew, long past you are as safe as you'll ever be. Chimneys are a luxury, and you, dear frost-bitten medieval sleep-seeker, do not have one. In the center of the room, the fire sputters. It's not majestic or roaring. It's a smoldering pile of coals under half-burned logs and a cautious dome of ash. Smoke curls lazily upward, but with nowhere to go. So it lingers. The hole in the roof above is less chimney and more hope. It's a rough circle hacked into the thatch, meant to let the worst of the smoke out. But tonight, the wind presses down on it, pushing the smoke right back in. It coils around the beams, licks the walls, and sneaks through the air like a judgmental ghost. Your eyes sting. Again. They always do. You cough softly, trying not to wake the others. Not out of politeness, but because they're human insulation. You disturb the huddle, you lose your spot. The air inside the house feels heavy. It's warm near the fire, yes, but warm the way a poorly ventilated cave is warm. The warmth sticks to your skin with the tang of ash and wet wool. Someone shifts on the floor nearby. They hack twice, then settle. It's a common sound. The nighttime chorus whine snores, coughs crackling wood, and occasionally the creak of a rat in the thatch. You learn to sleep through it, or you don't sleep at all. You pull the blanket up again and squint at the rafters. They're black with soot built from timber that may or may not still be structurally interested in its job. There's a dark spot in the corner where the smoke always pools. You imagine it's alive, watching, quietly judging your blanket choices. Odd fact. Some homes in the Middle Ages had what were called smoke hoods instead of chimneys. Wooden or stone funnels meant to direct the smoke outward. They worked. Sometimes. Other times, they just collected soot and became nests for birds. Historians still debate whether peasants tolerated the smoke because they were used to it, or if it slowly destroyed their lungs while they pretended everything was fine. Probably both. Tonight the fire is low. Your father gets up quietly and tosses on a few more sticks. The fire crackles in protest, throwing off a puff of smoke so thick you hear someone groan in their sleep. But it's worth it. The room is a degree warmer within minutes. Your father squats by the fire, blowing gently into the coals. His face is lined with years and soot, and his eyes shine orange in the light. He mutters to himself. Maybe a prayer. Maybe a curse. He doesn't stay up long, just long enough to make sure the flame catches. Then he folds back into the bedding beside the hearth, tugging his cloak over his head, like a turtle retreating into its shell. You envy the fire, not just for its heat, but for its attention. Everything in the room faces it. The family, the furniture, the dog, even your thoughts. It's the only thing that feels alive some nights. You used to sit closer to it before your cousin moved in. Now you're at the edge where the warmth fades and the cold nibbles. You can still see the firelight dance on the ceiling, though, and pretend it's a sunrise. There's a blackened pot hanging on the iron hook above the flames. It held soup earlier, barley and onion mostly. Now it's just the smell. You like that smell. It's the kind of smell that makes you think you might be okay. Not happy, not full, but okay. The smoke curls past your face again, and you blink slowly, lids heavy from the sting. You feel the soot on your skin, in your nostrils, in your lungs. You will taste ash in the morning, same as always. You roll to your side, one hand resting on the floor, where warm meets cold, like a border war. You think of castles again, chimneys, tapestries, clean air. You wonder if it's real. Then someone sneezes into the darkness loudly. A few groggy curses echo from the bundle of bodies near the wall. You hear your mother say, "Bless you," without opening her eyes. The fire pops. A coal rolls to the edge of the hearth with a tiny hiss. You briefly consider picking it up and tucking it under your blanket. You decide against it. Barely. Eventually, the smoke becomes background. Your eyes adjust. Your breath slows. You drift again, not quite asleep, but not awake either. You dream of chimneys. Huge ones. Beautiful stone towers that take smoke far, far away into the sky. You wave goodbye to the smoke. It flips you off as it leaves. You smile half asleep, even as a new gust of wind pushes a swirl of smoke back down into your blanket. Soup is heat you can drink, and in a medieval winter, that's about as close to luxury as you're going to get. You wake again sometime in the ink-black early hours. Stomach grumbling in protest. There's no midnight snack unless you count gnawing on memories. But earlier, when the fire was stronger and the smoke hadn't yet claimed your eyebrows, you were lucky enough to hold a bowl of hot soup in your numb fingers. It wasn't glamorous. It never is. The evening meal was ladled out from a soot-blackened cauldron that hangs over the hearth like an old grumpy friend. The contents barley, a few slivers of carrot, a suspicious root, and what was almost certainly the ghost of a chicken. The broth is cloudy, thickish, and bubbling with intent. Your mother stirs it with a wooden spoon the size of a child's arm, muttering under her breath as she eyes each bowl like she's measuring hope. You got yours last birth order politics. The bowl was clay-chipped and still warm from the fire. You held it in both hands like it might fly away. The heat sank into your palms and stayed there long after the last spoonful was gone. You sipped slowly, always slowly. Not just to make it last, but because hot soup, like life, is not something to rush when you only get one serving. Odd fact. In some regions, peasants thicken soup with stale bread or ground acorns, not for flavor, but for calories. You've had both. Acorns make your teeth feel like they've been cursed. Tonight, as you drift half asleep under your scratchy blanket, you remember the soup. You can still feel the warmth in your chest, still smell the oniony steam. You smile into the darkness, momentarily content. Historians still debate whether soup recipes changed much through the centuries, or if it was all just a rotation of whatever was not spoiled. Either way, you know one thing hot edible and vaguely recognizable was the trifecta of winter dining success. You recall how the steam from the pot had fogged the single greasy pane of horn that passed for a window. For a brief moment, it almost looked like there was light outside, like the warmth inside had pushed winter back a step. When you finished your soup, you held the empty bowl to your chest until it cooled. You didn't even mind the grit at the bottom. That was flavor. Allegedly. Now in your bed of straw and bones, your fingers remember the shape of the bowl, the way your breath mixed with the steam. The moment of warmth that reached all the way into your spine. Your cousin, still half awake beside you, mutters, "Good soup," and rolls over. You smile. Even in sleep, we remember the things that kept us alive. You think of tomorrow's soup. Maybe it'll have turnips. Maybe not. Maybe someone will trade a few mushrooms. Maybe not. But there will be soup. There must be soup. Because in the medieval night, when the wind slices through the shutters and the fire is too tired to fight anymore, soup is not just food. It is a promise that there will be another night, another bed, another cold morning where you wake up still breathing, and that you decide is enough, the clay bedpan debate. It comes every night right around the time your bladder wakes up before you do. You stir in your blanket nest, a reluctant awareness creeping over you that is not caused by the cold this time. No, this is internal. This is the call, and you know what it means. You blink in the smoky dark, listening to the breathing around you. All is still. Someone's wheezing like an old bellows, and a child is softly talking in their sleep about honey cakes, poor kid. But no one is moving. No one else is awake to share your suffering. You consider your options. Option 1. Get up, step carefully over at least 3 people and the family dog. Unlatch the door and go outside into the icy black void to do your business under a tree that may or may not be cursed. Option 2. Use the clay bedpan under the stool beside the door and try not to knock it over in the dark. You have on occasion chosen both. Neither ended well. The bedpan is made of coarse, unfinished pottery. It wobbles slightly and retains temperature in the worst possible way. It's also only marginally better than going outside because, let's be honest, you still have to empty it in the morning, and the smell has committed crimes against humanity. Odd fact. In some households, people peed into straw-stuffed jugs, or even communal wooden night buckets. Hygiene was negotiable, but anything was better than walking outside in a blizzard with your nightshirt flapping in the wind. Tonight you sigh dramatically quietly, of course, and shuffle your legs free. The cold bites your ankles with gleeful spite. You fumble toward the edge of your sleeping pile, stepping on someone's foot. A muffled grunt. You mouth an apology to the darkness and continue. Your fingers close around the familiar clay handle, the bedpan. There it is. Humble. Hideous. Heroic. You maneuver into position, shivering and whispering curses at your kidneys. The sound is embarrassing. The experience even worse. But relief, sweet, glorious, shame-laced relief is worth the existential hit to your dignity. Once done, you set the bedpan aside like it's made of explosive glass and inch back towards your straw mattress. Of course, in your half-frozen state, you misjudge the spacing. You trip. The bedpan wobbles. You catch it just in time with a strangled gasp. Your heart pounds. Somewhere across the room, someone groans and rolls over. You freeze one foot in the air like a very cold and very guilty stork. After a moment, the room returns to its usual symphony of snores and sniffles. You breathe again. You survived. Barely. Historians still debate whether medieval households had specific toilet training for night use, or if it was just expected that you develop a sixth sense for not spilling things that should never ever be spilled. You crawl back into your bedding. The warmth is gone, stolen by your brief excursion. You shiver violently and pull the blanket up to your nose, breathing into the wool like a dragon hiding under a rug. Odd smells cling to you now. You choose to ignore them. Survival is about compromise. As you settle back and your sibling nearby stirs. Did you knock over the pot again? They mumble. No, you whisper defensively, though. That's a lie you've told before. Good. Last time it splashed my shoes. You make a mental note to move your shoes. You close your eyes. The bed creaks. The wind howls. And the clay bedpan sits silently, a lurking reminder that you're never more than one midnight disaster away from becoming a legend in your own village for all the wrong reasons. Hats never come off, even in sleep. Especially in sleep. Because in the medieval world, you don't undress to get into bed. You dress up to go to sleep. Tonight, like every night, your head is swaddled in layers of desperate invention. First, a coarse woolen cap pulled down to your eyebrows. Over that, a tattered scarf wrapped under your chin and across your cheeks like you're preparing to rob a 15th century bread cart. On particularly brutal nights, you've even added a linen kerchief beneath it all, because layering isn't just a style, it's survival. You didn't even bother taking off your outer tunic. Why would you? The bed is as cold as the floor. Warmer, maybe, but only because it's yours. And it's not just the bed, everything breathes frost in here. Your breath comes out in clouds. Your pillow feels like a slab of refrigerated cabbage, and your ears hurt if left uncovered for more than 30 seconds. Odd fact. In some parts of medieval Europe, folks believed if your head got cold while sleeping, you'd die faster. Whether of pneumonia, demonic possession, or just being cursed, no one was quite sure. But better safe than 6 feet under. So on went the hats. You shift under your blankets and try to adjust your headgear. The scarf has slipped, and a cold draft slithers across your neck like a snake of ice. You groan softly, reach up with one stiff hand, and retie the ends beneath your chin. You resemble a grumpy snowman, but fashion is dead anyway. Next to you, someone sneezes directly into their blanket. You flinch instinctively. They mutter sorry and roll away. The stench of boiled onions wafts from their breath. You inhale through your scarf and try not to judge. You're no bouquet yourself. The fire has died again now, little more than orange crumbs, flickering weakly in the hearth. You can just make out the silhouette of someone, probably your mother, sitting up to poke at it with a stick. Sparks leap and scatter. One lands dangerously close to the dog, who lifts its head, gives an unimpressed snort, and lies back down. You try to fall asleep again, but the cold gnaws at your nose like it's trying to evict it from your face. You bury your head deeper into your scarf, wishing for the impossible, a bed with curtains, the kind lords have, draped in thick wool and lined with fur. Private. Warm. But you're lucky to have a curtain around the outhouse. Historians still debate whether medieval peasants used dedicated sleepwear or simply wore their daytime clothes at night. The evidence leans toward whatever you already had on. A separate set of pajamas dream on peasant. Your hat slips slightly, exposing one ear to the open air. The pain is immediate, sharp, and disproportionate. You wince and yank the cap down tighter, tucking the scarf edge around it like the world's saddest turban. You think of saints and their miracles. Surely somewhere there's a forgotten patron saint of warm ears. Maybe you'll invent one. Saint Flannery of the frost-bitten lobe. You'd pray nightly. Maybe light a candle, or burn a sock in her honor. But for now, all you have is this scratchy, slightly damp wool heap perched on your head like a reluctant guardian. And it will have to do, because medieval knights don't care how tired you are. They don't care about your dreams, your ambitions, or your bone-deep fatigue. They care only that you are warm or you aren't. And tonight, your hat lopsided, itchy, smelling faintly of goat is the only thing standing between you and a very bad morning. So you pull it lower, wrap tighter, and mutter one last grumble before sleep takes you again. You dream of summer, of wind without knives, of sunshine on your forehead, of walking outdoors without feeling like your ears are trying to escape your head. You laugh in your sleep, just a little, because even in the coldest places, dreams still warm the parts wool can't reach. Odd bedtime rituals. Because when the world is falling apart at the seams and your roof leaks, spiritual doubt, superstition makes a cozy blanket. You lie there swaddled in itchy wool and the collective body heat of your immediate gene pool and begin the sacred nightly routine, because it's not just about warmth, it's about not dying. Or at least tricking fate into giving you one more day. First, a whispered prayer to Saint Blaise. No one's quite sure what he's patron of anymore. Throats, maybe woolcombers. Either way, he gets name-dropped before sleep, because something about his name just sounds reliable. Saint Blaise. Keep my toes. Saint Cuthbert, watch the roof. You mumble like you're reciting a spell, half hopeful, half delirious. Religion in this context is both theology and early medieval insurance policy. Next, your grandmother insists on the chant. She does it every night, under her breath, rhythmic and unsettling. It's in a dialect so old, no one understands it anymore, but she says it keeps frostbite away. You don't question her. She's lived through 17 winters and 3 husbands. That's some serious medieval boss-level energy. Your younger sibling beside you taps a finger 3 times on the wooden bedpost. Tap, tap, tap. Then kisses their hat and turns counterclockwise before lying down. You asked once why. They just said, keeps the ghosts from sitting on my chest. Fair. Odd fact. Some medieval folks believed that cold was caused by evil spirits, not temperature. You could hang herbs, whisper Latin phrases, or sleep with garlic under your pillow to ward them off. Your family couldn't afford garlic, so you once tried a particularly mean-looking potato. It didn't help, but it gave you company. Tonight you've brought a special weapon to bed a rock. Not just any rock. This one was warmed near the fire earlier and then wrapped in cloth. You press it to your stomach like it's a loaf of bread with a good personality. It radiates leftover warmth, fleeting, but glorious. You sigh. Someone across the room is muttering their own ritual. Counting their fingers, maybe, or reciting the Lord's Prayer backward, probably not recommended. But nobody's stopping them. In the medieval night, there's no such thing as too weird when it comes to staying alive. You remember the old woman down the lane who swears by burying an iron nail in the threshold during winter solstice, or the shepherd who once slept with a blessed sheep tooth under his tongue. Everyone has something. Historians still debate whether these rituals had deep communal meaning or were just coping mechanisms in a world that rarely explained itself. But that's the thing when your life is governed by random chills, toothaches that might be fatal, and the fear of your goat giving you the evil eye rituals give you a sense of control. A feeling that maybe, just maybe, you're not entirely at the mercy of the wind. You lie back warm, rock clutched to your belly gap, snug around your head, blanket pulled to your eyebrows. One eye open, you whisper a final charm passed down from your great uncle that mentions firewood cabbage and a moon goddess. Does it make sense? Absolutely not. But you've never lost a toe in your sleep, have you? The wind outside groans against the shutters. You can almost hear it sigh in frustration, like it knows it's been thwarted tonight. You smile. Under layers of wool and whisper and wonder you settle in. Not comfortable, not secure, but buffered, protected by layers of belief, layers of habit, layers of mystery. And you sleep, dear peasant, not because you're warm, but because you've done everything you possibly can to keep the cold and the darkness and the invisible horrors of night just far enough away. Rodents have winter plans too, and unfortunately your mattress is part of the itinerary. You don't hear them at first, not over the wind and the snores and the fire's dying wheeze. But sometime between your second and third attempt at finding a comfortable position, the scratching starts. Scritch, scritch, scritch. It comes from beneath you, or beside you, or above. Maybe all three. That's the terrifying part. The sound moves skittering through straw like tiny nightmares with excellent cardio. You freeze. Not from fear, you're already cold. You freeze because moving means surrendering heat. So instead, you lie still and listen as the world's tiniest invaders throw a party in your bedding. Odd fact: medieval homes were rodent wonderlands, with no insulation, no sealed food storage, and straw-packed everything. It was like living inside a giant rat-friendly buffet. Mouse traps existed, sure, but they were about as effective as yelling, "Go away." You once caught 3 mice sharing a piece of hard cheese under your bed. They looked smug. One made eye contact. You haven't trusted eye contact since. Tonight it sounds like they've returned with friends, possibly cousins, possibly a mouse militia staging an uprising against your right to uninterrupted freezing. You shift slightly, just a small nudge to the left. The sound pauses. You wait. Then it starts again, louder this time. Scritch. A squeak. Then more scratching. You sigh and whisper a very quiet, very heartfelt curse into your scarf. Your brother, still asleep, twitches and mumbles, "Don't let them in my hood again." You shudder. You'd forgotten about that night. The night of the hood mouse. A tale not told around the fire because it's too soon. It's always too soon. Historians still debate whether rodents contributed to the spread of winter illness, or if they were simply part of the background horror of peasant life. Either way, everyone agreed on one thing: they were persistent and mildly evil. You remember a trick the baker's wife once told you: stuff mint in your bedding. Apparently mice hate it. But mint in winter? That's a fantasy. You're lucky to get onion scraps. So instead, you do what you always do. Pull your cloak tighter. Hope they don't climb on you, and make a mental note to shake out your straw tomorrow. Again, your hand brushes the edge of the bed, where a suspiciously soft lump turns out to be a stolen bread crust. Mystery solved. You chuck it across the room. It lands with a soft thud. The scratching pauses. you win. For now, you lie back victorious and slightly grossed out. Your mattress creaks. The wind moans. A mouse somewhere sighs in disappointment. Still, the peace is temporary. You know they'll return. The straw is warm. The blanket gap's irresistible. And let's face it, you live in a house made of food. If you were a mouse, you'd move in too. But as you close your eyes and drift back toward sleep, you find a strange kind of comfort in their presence. If the mice are still alive, it means the fire hasn't gone out. It means the world still turns, even if it turns with tiny whiskered feet. And so you rest, lightly, alert to squeaks, dreaming of castles with stone floors and no rodent roommates. You smile in your sleep despite everything. Because in the medieval winter, you learn to cherish the weird, persistent signs of life even when they have fur and questionable manners. Morning frost inside. You wake not to a rooster or a bell, or even the soft chatter of your family, but to the gentle, horrifying realization that your breath is visible. And it's not the only thing that is. Your blanket has grown stiff with cold, like it's considering becoming armor. The tip of your nose aches. You wiggle your fingers inside the wool cocoon and feel the brittle sting of winter etched into your joints. And then you see it, a delicate sheen of frost sparkling on the wooden beam above your head. Inside. Welcome to your morning. You sit up slowly, every movement cracking with protest. Your spine sounds like a bundle of twigs. You rub your eyes and look around. The small clay water jug near the hearth, frozen solid. A spoon left in the corner, rimmed with ice crystals. Your boots. Don't even ask. Someone coughs. Someone always coughs. You pull your blanket tighter and glance at the window, or rather, the cloth-covered hole that pretends to be one. A sliver of grayish-blue light seeps through the corner. It's barely dawn, and already the house is shivering. Odd fact in some medieval households, it was normal to wake up with ice on the inside of the walls. Thatch roofs didn't trap heat. They trapped wind. Even breath froze into rime when it hit the cold surface. It looked pretty. It felt like betrayal. Your cousin peels back his blanket, releasing a puff of steam. Cold, he says. Understatement of the century. You swing your legs over the edge of your straw mattress. The floor feels like punishment. You hiss through your teeth and do a little hop step toward the hearth. You look like a goose trying to walk across frozen mud. It's not dignified. Dignity left sometime in October. There's a pathetic gray ember clinging to life in the ashes. You poke at it with the iron stick and pray to all available saints that it relights. It doesn't. You sigh and shuffle to the firewood stack, which is predictably damp. You mutter, you curse, you try anyway. Historians still debate whether people preferred waking up early in winter for the fire, or if it was just a biological revenge from sleeping cold and cramped. Either way, mornings weren't peaceful. They were tactical battles for warmth. You breathe onto your fingers to thaw them enough to tie your belt. Your tunic is stiff. Your leggings feel like frozen laundry. Even your hat has turned against you, less wool, more ice helmet. From the corner, your grandmother mumbles, "Smek the hen." You nod. The hen, if she hasn't frozen to the perch again, might have laid something. Or just stared blankly into the abyss of winter. Chickens are dramatic. Odd detail, some families let their animals sleep indoors. Not for companionship, but for shared warmth. The goat you vaguely remember from your childhood. It used to sleep near the door. You hated it. It snored louder than your uncle and tried to eat your hair. You cup your hands around the clay water jug. No luck. Still frozen. You'll need to melt some snow for drinking and washing if you can be bothered to wash today. Honestly, who are you trying to impress, the ice spirits? You scrape a thin layer of frost from your blanket and flick it aside. It lands on your cousin's bare foot. He yelps. Sorry, you lie. Outside, the light grows stronger. The world beyond the door is a sheet of white snow, blanketing fields, paths, rooftops. Even the sad little privy you'd rather not visit. You sigh. You're not ready. Not yet. You sit by the hearth, cradling your knees, staring into last night's fire, as if it owes you an apology. Eventually, someone will start cooking probably another soup. Eventually, the fire will be coaxed back to life. Eventually, your toes will thaw, but for now you just breathe. In fog. Out fog. Watching your breath rise like a ghost of the warmth that used to live in this house. You survived another night. Barely. Not gracefully. But survival like soup doesn't need seasoning to count. Fireside gossip and cold toes. You shuffle across the frozen floor like a reluctant pilgrim, your blanket still draped around your shoulders, like a very itchy cape. The fire has finally been revived, and the room now glows with the faint orange confidence of something that might keep you alive. Everyone's awake or pretending to be. Your mother is poking at the soup pot. Your father's whittling a stick that absolutely does not need whittling. Your brother is still lying down but somehow chewing on something. Probably frozen bread. Possibly a piece of cloth. It's hard to say. You join the huddle near the hearth, where heat barely kisses the air within a foot of the flames. You slide your toes as close as you dare, careful not to let the soles of your shoes or what's left of them catch fire. Odd fact. It wasn't uncommon for people to dry their clothes or even their socks on sticks near the fire. Not out of convenience, but because walking around in damp wool during a medieval winter was basically asking to turn into a historical cautionary tale. You've got one sock steaming gently on a sharpened branch right now. A peasant's clothesline. There's something magical about this part of the day, brief, smoky, and full of half-hearted complaints. Woke up with a spider in my ear, your uncle mutters, pouring a ladle of hot broth into a wooden bowl. Be grateful, your grandmother says. It's warmth and protein. I'm pretty sure. It's alive. Even better. Laughter ripples around the hearth. Not hearty laughter. Not happy laughter. But the kind that happens when you're too tired to be sad and too cold to bother pretending. You cup your hands around a steaming bowl thinner soup today. More water, fewer turnip bits. But it's hot, and the bowl warms your fingers better than any fire ever has. Someone starts a story. They always do. It begins with, "Did I tell you what old Bertram did last winter?" and quickly devolves into a mix of exaggeration, slander, and folklore. Apparently, Bertram once slept through a snowstorm because he was wearing 3 hats, a pigskin vest, and was halfway drunk on fermented pear mash. He woke up under 2 feet of snow and declared it refreshing. You've heard this story a dozen times. You laugh anyway. It's part of the ritual. Historians still debate how important oral storytelling was in peasant life. But let's be real when there's no theater, no books, and only 3 cups between the whole family. A good story is gold, especially one with slightly inappropriate barnyard humor. Your cousin chimes in with a memory about the time a goose snuck inside and nested in their bed. "I thought it was Grandma," they whisper. "I am a bit goose-shaped," Grandma replies entirely unfazed. More laughter. Louder now. Outside, the light is bright, but weak sunlight filtered through the iron sky of January. You know soon you'll have to go out. Check the traps. Haul water. Patch the wall that started to lean like it's drunk. But not yet. Not while your toes are still thawing. You wiggle them under the blanket. They respond barely. Your left pinky toe might be dead. You nudge it with the steaming bowl and hope for the best. Someone sneezes. Someone else blesses them. The fire crackles. The socks steam. The gossip flows. You watch the flames dance and imagine being somewhere warmer. Rome, maybe. Or just a castle. One with real floors and stones that hold heat. You know it's silly. You'll never see a castle. But that doesn't stop the dream. Because here in this rough little room, surrounded by family frost and the smell of overcooked barley, the fire feels like a window to something kinder, and for a few quiet moments you forget that your boots leak and your bed has mice. You forget the frost on the walls and the rock you almost peed on. You just breathe. Warm. Together. Alive. Boiled laundry and steam. Today the house smells like wet wool, scorched soap root and triumph. Someone is doing laundry, actual full-body, wholly and frozen wool laundry, and that's as rare as a warm breeze in February. It started this morning when your mother muttered, "We smell worse than the pig pen." No one disagreed, not even the dog. So now in a wide, blackened cauldron hanging over the fire, shirts, socks, underthings, and mystery rags are bubbling like soup for someone you don't like. A long stick stirs the mixture. Bubbles rise. The house steams like a bathhouse with commitment issues. You sit nearby mostly for warmth, partly for the gossip, and a tiny bit for the delusion that the steam will moisturize your sinuses. Odd fact, in the Middle Ages, people did wash their clothes, though. Not often. Washing was labor-intensive and best done communally. Hot water had to be boiled. Ash or soap root mixed in. Garments beaten, wrung out, then dried by the fire, or God forbid outside in the wind, where they'd turn to stiff little tunic sickles. You watch the steam rise in ghostly curls. It clings to the rafters and drips occasionally. The windows fog, turning the room into a peasant's sauna. And for once you're not freezing, your sister sits across from you humming tunelessly as she knits a sock out of yarn that used to be something else. Possibly another sock. Possibly a blanket. Maybe even a deceased hat. Medieval fashion has a lot of reincarnation. The older women joke quietly while they scrub at particularly offensive stains. Your aunt holds up a pair of trousers and says, "This might have been brown to start. Might still be. No promises." Everyone laughs. You smile. Not just because of the warmth, but because boiled laundry means the illusion of progress. The idea that even in the face of endless cold, you're fighting back one scalded tunic at a time. Someone strips off their outer tunic and holds their arms over the steam, letting it rise into their sleeves. Better than bath day, they mutter. You agree. Bath day, after all, is a terrifying ordeal involving barrels, goat fat soap, and a level of nudity you're never emotionally prepared for. Historians still debate whether medieval peasants avoided bathing due to lack of access or simply because clean was more philosophical than physical. Either way, steam day is the superior ritual. Your feet are close to the fire now, dangerously close. One sock sizzles faintly. You yank it back just in time, muttering a quiet prayer to Saint Crispin, patron of cobblers, and you decide very stressed toes. The freshly boiled shirts are draped across the rafters like a gallery of damp ghosts. They drip steadily onto the floor, creating a very small, very cold puddle that will absolutely betray someone in about 5 minutes. You inhale deeply. The scent is strange smoke, sweat-wet sheep and ash, but also oddly comforting. A mix of effort and survival. Your grandmother eyes you and says you're next. You pretend you don't hear. She throws a rag at your head. Fair. You gather your own bundle of rags, your week's wardrobe, and prepare to enter the ritual. It's not pleasant. The water's hot, but your hands will go raw. The soap burns a little. You'll smell vaguely like roots and boiled leather for days. But it's worth it. Because when the clothes are dry, even a scratchy shirt feels luxurious when it's clean. Or let's say cleaner. You dip your first tunic into the pot, grimacing at the heat and the squelch. It's oddly satisfying, like washing away a little bit of winter itself. You scrub. You wring. You hang the cloth near the hearth where it will smell like wood smoke for eternity. And then you sit, steaming gently, watching the fire, letting your hands thaw, and your breath slow. The cold is still outside, still waiting. But in this moment, with the air thick with heat and the clothes dripping steadily onto the floorboards, you are warmer than you've been in days, and for a little while, the house feels like it's winning. Spring is a rumor. You wake up, and for the first time in what feels like a century, you hear birds. Not many, just one. Maybe two. Their chirping is thin and skeptical, like they don't quite believe it either. But still, there it is. A sound that isn't wind firewood creaking or your uncle's thunderous sleep snorts. You roll over in your bed of half-flat straw, blinking against a sunbeam that filters through the tattered cloth over the window. It's brighter, softer, the kind of light that doesn't bite. Someone outside is shouting. Something about a thaw. Something about the stream moving again. You sit up slowly. Every joint protests, but not as loudly as usual. Your breath is still visible, but barely. The jug by the fire isn't frozen. Not fully, anyway. You knock it gently and it sloshes. That's water. Not ice. That's a victory. Your sister bursts in a moment later, pink-cheeked and barefoot. The ground's mushy. She yells like she's announcing the return of the king. Odd fact. Medieval peasants sometimes use the term the green wakes to describe those earliest signs of spring, the first blades of grass, the tiniest flower peeking through slush, the smell of thawed manure. Not poetic, but true. You swing your legs over the bed, and your feet don't scream when they touch the floor. They grumble, they sigh, but they don't scream. Outside patches of dark brown earth peek through the snow. The garden is still dead. The trees still bare. But the light is different now. The world's cold breath is less hostile. Someone brings up the last time spring came late. Remember 93, they say. The ground froze until May. Someone else says it was 92. They argue briefly, then shrug. Everyone survived. That's all that matters. The soup is still thin, but now there are a few green leaves in it. Dandelions, maybe. Or nettles. You don't care. It tastes like possibility. You go outside, pulling your threadbare cloak tighter, not out of misery, but habit. The air smells like thawed mud and damp wool, like the world exhaling. Historians still debate how dramatically seasons affected medieval peasant psychology. Some say spring brought joy. Others say it just meant different work. But you feel it, because the cold never really leaves. It retreats, it sulks, it lingers in corners. But even in the Middle Ages, people know when the tide turns. Not because of a date, because of birds, because of breath. Because you wake up one day and think, I might not die today, and that thought is everything. You return to the fire where socks still dry, and someone is tuning a lute that only has 3 strings left. Your father laughs at something your brother said. The dog barks at a stick like it's an intruder. The house is still broken, still smoky, still poor, but it's alive. You survived the winter. Somehow. Through soup, body heat, sour bread, holy rocks, shared farts under blankets, and dreams of chimneys. And now you laugh. Because it was awful. Because it's over. Because somehow you're still here. And now as the fire burns lower and your eyelids feel heavier, the story slips back into silence. You made it through the coldest nights. Not with ease, not with comfort, but with persistence and wool, with smoke and soup, and the tender, grudging closeness of people who had no choice but to share warmth. You survived the drafty walls and the mice in the straw. You endured the midnight trips to the bedpan and the ritual of wrapping rocks in cloth for warmth. You whispered your strange prayers to forgotten saints, pulled your scarf tighter, and let frost lace your windows from the inside. But even in that bitter world, there were small, stubborn joys. A warm bowl of broth, a laugh by the fire, a hat that didn't itch too much. These were the victories. These were the things that made the unbearable days worth it. And finally spring crept in, not like a trumpet, but like a breath. Gentle, cautious, real. So tonight, as your own blanket hugs your shoulders and your modern walls, hum with quiet electricity. Let the memory of those long, cold nights drift through your mind like smoke from a hearth. Let it remind you that people have always endured, always adapted, always found something, anything, to laugh about in the dark. Close your eyes now. Let the fire inside the story fade. Let your breath slow. Let the weight of the night wrap around you like a woolen cloak passed down through generations. You made it. They made it. We all do somehow. Good night, traveler.